This is the User Adoption Podcast with your host, Henrik Dagier.
Who are you and what do you do?
Hi, my name is Chip Edwards, and I'm a partner at the firm Create My Voice. We help growing companies develop a strategy to engage an audience using these new voice technology platforms, like the smart speakers, Amazon Alexa, and Google Home. We also help with what's sometimes called registering a verbal domain name, which I'm sure we'll talk about in just a couple minutes.
Chip, how are you involved with user adoption?
Almost everyone has access to a digital voice assistant, whether it's in a smart speaker like Amazon Alexa or in a smartphone like Siri or Google Assistant. With these voice platforms that are always listening for your command, the user engagement model is very different than with a website or social media. Because with these voice platforms, we're shifting the cognitive load from the user to the device. Voice platforms are moving towards how in-person engagement works. But currently, users are still figuring out how to use these voice assistants, and technologists are still figuring out how to make them interact like a real person. So voice platforms are becoming conversational. My involvement in user adoption is to help companies understand the voice-first model, to help them claim their verbal domain name, and to take the first steps into using these voice platforms to engage with their audience.
Chip, what are the biggest challenges and successes you've seen with user adoption?
The adoption rate for using voice technology has been very fast. While smart speakers and more broadly voice assistants are rapidly being adopted by the mainstream, companies and brands are lagging in using these voice platforms to engage their audience. And to make matters worse, both Google and Amazon's voice app stores are riddled with negative reviews because there's a gap between how companies are building their voice models and consumer expectation. This gap in expectation is the challenge the industry has in figuring out how to build voice models that will delight customers, meeting their expectations when they use these voice assistant devices. With our products, we're seeing good usage patterns, and our clients are very happy with the work that we've been doing with them. As I speak at conferences, the biggest challenge I'm finding is around awareness, though. Few companies are aware that they can use these voice platforms to engage their audience, or that there's this thing called a verbal domain name. A verbal domain name, sometimes called an invocation name, is often the verbal version of your domain name or brand name. Choosing and registering your verbal domain name is part of how we help our clients. Your verbal domain name is the foundation for even starting a user adoption strategy with voice assistants. Users can't adopt your content if you aren't on the platform, and the first step for getting on the platform is to register your verbal domain name. In fact, whoever registers your verbal domain name is going to control the dialogue with your audience.
Chip, what advice would you like to share with people working on improving user adoption?
Whether you love them or hate them, the mainstream consumer is adopting these voice platforms. You may choose not to use these voice platforms, but your audience is using them. And the marketing push to get these devices everywhere is huge. And as consumers start relying on the convenience these platforms provide, you won't be able to ignore voice platforms any longer. While consumer adoption is solidly in the mainstream stage, business adoption is still in the innovator or maybe the early adopter stage. Businesses are just starting to realize that consumers are using voice platforms and that voice platforms require a strategy and action to engage on these voice platforms. It's like it's 1995 again, and we're just hearing about this thing called the internet. In 1995, you could get almost any domain name you wanted. You could choose a brand name and then register the domain name. Now you have to register your domain name first before deciding on a brand name. On voice platforms, it's currently easy to claim your verbal domain name. And the first step in user adoption is owning your brand and raising awareness. So for any brand owner or business, I'd strongly recommend they start by securing their verbal domain name, also known as an invocation name, and then develop a strategy for engaging their audience on these voice platforms.
Chip, where can we learn more about user adoption and your work on the subject?
In addition to following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook, I publish a blog on my website, createmyvoice.com. Often, I write blog posts to demonstrate the capabilities of these voice platforms. So while you can read my blog posts, they're often better to listen to. So, how do you listen to a blog post? Well, earlier I mentioned securing your verbal domain name. I claimed the verbal domain name of Create My Voice and connected it with the blog on my website. Now you can talk to these voice platforms and hear my blog posts. So, if you have an Amazon Alexa smart speaker or any Google Assistant device, you can hear my posts just by saying, "Alexa," or "Hey Google, ask Create My Voice to read the latest blog post." Your Alexa or Google Assistant device will then read my blog post to you. At this time, Amazon Alexa has more capabilities than Google Assistant, so hearing her read the blog post is more interesting. For those without an Alexa or Google Assistant, I have a recording embedded in many of the posts on my website so that you can hear them. As an aside, I probably get 10 times more listeners than I do readers. Again, my website is createmyvoice.com.
Well, thanks, Chip.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it, Henrik.
For more on this, visit useradoptionpodcast.com. Don't forget to please subscribe, rate, and review. And for a book about this, check out useradoptionbook.com. Tune in next week for the next episode. Thanks for listening.